Hello and welcome. Welcome to Input English. In this episode, we're going to talk about Mr. Harper. You met Mr. Harper in a previous video because Mr. Ben Harper is the neighbor of Trevor. He's the owner of the garage with the window that Trevor broke with a pebble shot from a slingshot. And you may recall that Mr. Harper caught up with the kids out on the street and chastised them for breaking his window. He issued a threat that he would turn them into the police if any more windows were broken. Well, Mr. Harper has a big secret, and Mr. Harper has been thinking about that incident with the broken window and the threats that he issued to those boys, and it's really been bothering him. So in this episode, Mr. Harper noticed that the boys, Trevor and Craig, were in Trevor's backyard. So he took this opportunity to go out into his backyard and call them over to the fence. He called Trevor by name, which really surprised Trevor. He did not expect that. And when he called to him, he said, "Would you boys come over here? I have something I'd like to talk to you about." They came over to the fence and listened to what he had to say. He said, "Do you remember a while back when one of you boys apparently broke that window on my garage and I gave you a hard time in the street?" The boys nodded. He said, "Well, I've been thinking about that since that day, and it's just not right. If you'll let me, I'd like to make it right." The boys listened without any reply. He said, "I shouldn't have lost my temper. In the big picture, a window pane isn't that important, and I really regret that I lost my temper. I also regret that I issued that threat that I would turn you into the police because that was a hollow threat. I would never have turned you into the police. And so if I make a hollow threat like that, I'm telling a lie. This just won't do. To you, I tell you, I have no intention of turning you into the police. I don't expect that you'll likely break any more windows. And I'd like to bury the hatchet and just be friends. Do you think we could do that?" Both boys nodded in the affirmative. Yes, that would be fine. Mr. Harper said, window panes aren't really that important, but how we treat other human beings turns out to be real important. So, I'm sure you boys learned a little bit from that episode, and I certainly learned a lot. But other than what we learned going forward, let's just assume that that didn't happen. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to concern ourselves about. The boys looked at Mr. Harper, looked at each other, smiled broadly, and nodded. "Okay, thank you. I got to go back into the house," he said. And with that, Mr. Harper excused himself and went back into the house. When he was out of earshot, Trevor turned to Craig and said, "That was odd. Wonder what that was all about." Craig said, "Well, I guess it was bothering him and he was sick of having that thing worry him, so he wanted to get rid of it." "Makes sense. He told us." Trevor said, "I guess so." The two boys continued to entertain themselves in Trevor's yard. When Mr. Harper got into his house, he walked directly to the desk. On the top of the desk, there was a large book. He opened it and he flipped through the pages until he found the page he was looking for. With his index finger, he went down the page until he found the entry he was searching for. And then he traced that entry to the far left, and there was a column of boxes little squares, and he traced his finger over to the box corresponding with that entry. He picked up a pen from the desk and he checked the box off. He flipped a little bit forward and a little bit back, surveying the other entries in the book, and then he closed the book. He sighed. He then reached into his pocket and pulled out a little pocket book and flipped through the pages in that until he came to the current date. On that page, there were 3 entries, each with a little square box that needed to be checked off. The top entry was the same entry as he had just checked off in the big book. He picked up the same pen and checked off the box in his pocketbook. He has 2 more boxes that he needs to check off for that day. He looked at the 2 tasks, he nodded, put the book back in his pocket. He walked away from the desk with plans for how he was going to conduct the rest of his day. He was going to check those 2 boxes off. So, what was the entry in the book and in the pocketbook that he checked off today? And why is he checking off all these boxes? What is going on here? Well, the entry that he checked off simply read, "Make amends to Trevor." That's all it said. Why is he checking off all these boxes? What is he up to? In future videos, you're going to see exactly what's happening and why it's all happening. But at this point, I can tell you that it's all related to his big secret. Mr. Ben Harper has a huge secret, and almost all the entries in his master ledger book and in the pocket book with the little boxes to be checked off are in service of his big secret. So this is the first episode in a series of videos related to Mr. Ben Harper. So this is the Ben Harper series. And in this series, you're going to learn about his big secret and all the adventures that he gets involved in related to that big secret. That's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I encourage comments below, and I hope you join us in future videos. See you soon.